going to need an oil pan, a clutch compression kit, Allen keys, a screw grab, and you also need a Torx T27. And here we have the drill, the wrenches. You need 7/8, 5/8, and then half. Now we have some pliers, a Phillips head screwdriver, magnets, and of course our primary fluid. So to start, we're going to drain the primary fluid from our primary case, and we're going to do that by unscrewing the bolt on the right side. It's going to take a 5/8. And then after you're done with that, you can start disassembling everything else. I'm going to start with the foot pegs here. And then taking the transmission lever out by unscrewing that with an Allen key. And then just sliding it off. Alright, and then finishing up the disassembly of the foot peg. After that, I'm going to loosen up the clutch cable. When I'm taking off the derby cover, I like to use screw grab because the Torx screws are already not optimal for friction. And to make it worse, Harley Davidson makes theirs out of cheese. So it's very easy to strip the screws on those. The first time I did it, I used a T25, and that screw was a little difficult to get out. And once the derby cover is off, I'm going to take out the thing. It's this thing. And then after that, you can just take off the primary case. Now we can see our lovely crankshaft and our clutch assembly. So to take off the clutch assembly, you first need to use the clutch compression kit to remove the spring plate. You're going to thread the long tube over the small cylinder coming out of your bike, and then you're going to tighten that, and then you're going to put the blue thing over it, and then use the handle at the end to compress everything together. You're going to get a little bit of a wiggle. That's good. And that's what's going to allow you to do this next part. This is the hardest part. It's very finicky. So you need to use a Phillips screwdriver to kind of poke the inner ring in. And then you can use your fingers to press on the outer ring and bend it out. So the first time I did this, the spring plate, or the grenade plate as people love to call it, was actually blown up in there. So there was pieces of metal preventing it from being fully compressed, so I had to literally pry the outer ring out, and it completely destroyed it. I had to buy a new one. And now I'm just removing the actual clutch plates with a magnet, checking that the spinny thing still spins. And this is the culprit, perhaps why I have metal shavings in my oil. So you can see that the pigment has been rubbed off of that clutch plate, whereas the other ones are completely, orange. My hunch is that the Alto clutch plates are just thicker because I didn't buy them as a set. I bought them as, I think, 7 clutch plates and then an extra one to replace the spring plate. So maybe I just need to buy a complete kit that's meant to replace the spring plate. A temporary solution is loosening the clutch adjustment and placing the affected clutch plate at a different position so that they all wear uniformly. I might just buy more of the Alto clutch plates because they are pretty cheap. The bike ride's fine. Like, the clutch works great. I'm just not sure what's going on with this premature wear and why my oil was so dirty in the first place. Maybe it'll just fix itself. I mean, honestly, maybe it just needs to wear more so that the clutch fits better. Or maybe there's just nothing wrong and I'm just paranoid. So now we're going to do everything backwards. We're going to start off with the spring already compressed, and then we're going to put that back in, put in our rings. Remember, this smaller ring goes in first, and then you got to loop and just press and finagle the outer ring in. Right now, this is the primary case, and you can see the blue thing at the bottom. That is the chain tensioner, and you have to loosen that up. And now you put on your gasket. It's a thin piece of plastic to make sure none of the oil leaks out. Some people recommend you buy a new one every time you take the primary case off. I've used the same one for the past year. It's been fine. Once it starts leaking, I'll buy a new one. And now you put the primary case back on. I use my fingers to push up the chain so that the case can fit, and then you drill it in. Now I'm putting in the bolt for the oil. You need to make sure you put this bolt back in. Otherwise, when you put in new oil, it'll just drip right out. So now I'm taking off the tiny little cover, and that is so I can see the chain, so I know to readjust the chain tensioner to have the right tension. The correct tension should be 1/2 inch of movement. That's why we have a 1/2 inch wrench, is just to measure that. Not pictured here is putting the primary oil into that hole, and then readjusting and then reassembling of those pieces. And then, of course, the foot peg as well, putting the derby cover back on. And now we're readjusting the cable, and you're all set to go.